Okay, well, welcome to this podcast. So this is a slightly different podcast to what I've done before. I'm with Shane Rozario, who is in Sydney, and I'm in France. So there might be a delay. And anyway, I'll just say quickly, hello, Shane.
Hi, Graham. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, as always. So Shane and I have known each other a little while now. So Shane... I met Shane because he has a project in Sydney called We're Observers. And it's a really good project. It's a way of people kind of getting back into their photography, asking questions, spending time with a professional photographer. And Shane, Shane. And we also have Colin Seaton, who is very good on the smartphone stuff and also post-processing, all of that. And I got involved with We're Observers for a short time in Sydney. I think it was about 18 months. It felt longer.
Yeah. It did feel like a long time, Graham. It did feel like a long time. I couldn't get rid of you, I think.
I was very lonely. Nothing to do. So the idea of this podcast is we thought we'd have a chat about how to approach doing... Well, I've called it a photo shoot, but it could also be a project or whatever. But anything you're thinking about doing for photography. And I mean, I tend to come at it from the wildlife perspective, whereas Shane is a commercial photographer and in fact started out by, did you follow around musicians? Or was that...
Yeah, well, I wasn't too far from you when I started photography. It was in London and I was off on a backpacking trip in 1998 and I bought a camera duty-free. It was a film camera. I think it might have even be the Pentax MZ50. It's etched in my brain.
Very nice.
And I bought this camera. I had no idea. I basically bought it because you get the duty-free. And so when you buy it, you get it's a little bit cheaper. And so I took this camera with me overseas and I got to London and I didn't know about this, but my favorite band, Ben Harper and the Innocent Criminals at the time, was just about to start his tour in England. And he had recently finished his tour in Sydney. And my friends and I went to see all his shows. We got backstage, we met the band and everything. It was a really good, fun experience. And literally 2 or 3 months after that tour, I ended up in London. And coincidentally, he ended up in London 4 days after I did. And so as I was flicking through the music papers, I saw his ad. And so I packed my bag, went to, I think it was Bristol, the first show. And he was playing at the University Hall. Can't remember which university. And I knew...
Bristol?
Yeah, Bristol University.
Could have been. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know.
Sounds sensible. Let's call it Bristol University.
Let's call it that.
And so anyway, I knew, like in Sydney, it was before the time of high-end security, so we used to sneak into a lot of shows in Sydney. So I sort of knew the routine. So at 3:00, I knew they would sound check, and so I made sure I got there at 3. And I walked to the back of the venue, and there was a really scary bouncer there, and he stopped me and he asked me what I was doing there. And at the time, I used to wear these flamboyant clothes. They were secondhand clothes, but I was right into all the music of the 60s, 70s, all the hippies and the bohos, And so I had these velour pink flares on.
Very nice.
Shiny blue top. I don't know what I looked like at the time. I didn't care.
You're really selling it.
Yeah, but to him, I looked like I was part of the band because no one wears this stuff on a normal day in public.
Stage clothes.
Without being in a band, right? So he took one look at me, and I said to him, "Oh, it's all right, mate. I'm with the band." And he goes, "All right, no worries." And he showed me the door, and it took me straight into the venue where they were sound checking. And I went up and I asked if I could tour, and Ben Harper said if I could make all of the shows, he'd give me a pass to get in. And so essentially, that was like bewildering to me because in fact, I didn't know anything about photography then. All I knew was I had my camera. And actually, in fact, if we're talking about preparation, this is probably
because that brings us to preparation. But knowing how to deal with the bouncer wasn't quite what I had in mind. But it's all good to know. Yeah,
it's all. In fact, what I was going to say on that note was before I left London to go to Bristol, I had to prepare all of my stuff to be able to sneak into that show, because I already had the plan to sneak into the show.
Yeah.
I already visualized being on tour with him. And so, lucky for me, the only thing I had with me was a backpack with clothes and this duty-free camera. So the preparation wasn't too difficult.
And I should also say at this point, we're not condoning that you sneak into into
we could condone
music
it.
events.
Would make no difference. It would make no difference because it's nearly impossible to sneak into shows.
True.
These days. The heyday of sneaking into shows is gone.
You hit the sweet spot. Okay, so the purpose of this is to talk about the kind of things to think about. So other than getting past security, which isn't one that is on my list, but and I guess it's good to clarify. I'm looking at it mostly. I look at it from a wildlife perspective because that's what I'm usually going off to photograph. Whereas Shane doesn't deal with wildlife too often. I'm not going to say Colin. But more from a commercial. Your daughter. Well, yeah, we could talk about photographing children as well. But I thought it'd be useful to run through the kind of things that we think about when we're approaching a shoot or a project. And because if you're thinking of doing something like this, it's good to have some reference points, because I think, particularly with the preparation, if you get your preparation right, the actual shoot itself could be much easier. And if you are doing something like shooting people or something that you're not used to doing, it allows you to really focus on the things you need to be focused on when you're doing the shoot, like just working with the person rather than worrying about your gear and, what settings should I have and all this kind of stuff if you've done your preparation. So, Shane, if you want to maybe kick off with the kind of planning you do and how you approach your shoots. What would you start with?
Yeah, look, that story about how I got into photography is a wonderful tale of adventure. But when I did get back to Sydney a few years later, I was introduced to an advertising photographer in Sydney who was from England. And when photographers learned their craft back in the day, you usually did it like a trade, right? So you team up with a photographer whose work you love and learn everything about photography through doing it. And so you're in the studio. So I was with a guy called Ian Butterworth. He was an automotive photographer and shooting on 5.4 film. And I had no idea about 5.4 film, but I did know.
So just to clarify, that's a medium format film for those who are digital, grew up with digital, and suddenly don't know what we're talking about.
Yes, yeah. It's digital format, and I was very, very green with film photography. But what happened was, because I knew digital, I was taken on because digital was just coming in to professional photography at that level. So it was a very interesting time because I knew enough about digital photography or how computers worked in conjunction with photography, because my background was graphic design and printing. And so I understood color, I understood all that stuff. And so I got into the advertising photography that way as an assistant to this guy. And we were doing massive shoots. And so all of the prep that we had to do fell on me. It was my responsibility. Right. And so everything that we needed for the shoot had to be there, because we would generally be away from the studio and we would be in some remote location. And when you're working with film, especially large format or medium format film, you want to have all your dark slides loaded, everything packed away in boxes, and you don't want to forget a lens.
Yeah.
and so I would watch him, and one of the things that he said to me very early, which I still remember and I still use, is you pre-visualize the shoot.
Right.
And you go from the very basics to the detail. So the very basics are obviously your camera, your tripod, the right head for the tripod, maybe a computer, all the cables you need. Then you go to batteries for your camera. So all that stuff, right? So you've got to pre-visualize what you're doing. And from that pre-visualization, you develop these habits that walk you through a structure of almost categorizing your gear from basics to detail.
Yeah.
You have a general list, which you can see in your head. And then you have a detailed list, which is specific to whatever the project or the job or the adventure might be. And so that stuck with me for all these years. You know, it just sat in my head. And the more you practice something, the more it becomes part of your process, I guess.
Yeah, that's really good, because I was thinking of when I went to Uganda and I was photographing gorillas. That involved basically, although I didn't know it when I set out, I knew it could be up to a 3-hour hike each way, and you're on the mountain gorillas. So the clue there is in the first word. You're in the foothills. So, and it's rainy season, because that's when they're on the ground eating bamboo shoots. So, but of course it's wet. You're walking through undergrowth a lot of the time. It's very slippery. And again, so I'm thinking through, what am I going to be shooting in? So I'm in forest. Even if I've got bright sunshine, I've probably got this alternating very bright and very dark areas caused by sunlight coming through trees. So I did take a long telephoto, and it really didn't handle it well at all. But I'm also lugging this stuff for a good 6-7 hours, because we were with the gorillas for the best part of an hour. So that was another thought, and you don't leave a lens behind because it's a bit inconvenient. But it's that sort of thing too, and knowing that I've got to lug it. And then one of the tips I give people when if you're going to be carrying gear, is always get a backpack with hip straps on, so that most of the weight is on your hips and not on your shoulders, because that can make a huge difference. And camera gear gets heavy, plus you might be carrying water. You might have, my rain jacket I'd actually tie around my waist, but you've got all this other stuff. If you're away from the studio, but what you're describing, you're going to be away from the studio as well. It's just, you might be able to set up, and you might be able to carry it in a car, something like that.
It's a different beast when you're talking about commercial work as opposed to solo projects, right? So I'll give an example. When we went on these big jobs with advertising clients, you have a van, you've got a day or two to prepare for the job, you've got a brief, you've got a layout, you know exactly what you have to do. Yeah. So the pre-pack is pretty easy in that respect, right? You just need to make sure you don't forget anything. So the pre-pack's easy. But when you come to solo traveling and project work, there was a friend of mine who used to take people away hiking, and I used to go along with him as the photographer. And we used to go on these mad hikes. He was a very fit. It was like Bear Grylls before I discovered Bear Grylls existed. He was a bit like that, right? A bit wild, and enjoyed the challenge of nature, and loved walking. And he loved photography. He didn't do it, but we became really good friends because he appreciated what I did. I appreciated what he did, and so we teamed up. And when he'd do these big hikes, I'd go along as the photographer, and so my role was to capture everything that went on, documentary style. So, right. So there was a trip we did. It was a 10-day sea kayaking adventure to Fiji, to an island called I forget the name of the island, but it's one of the very last islands in the archipelago. Right. And there was lots of trekking, and I had to carry all of my gear with me. I had to carry all of my gear with me, and I remember doing a bunch of research to figure out how to access the lenses and the batteries and all these bits without having to stop, unpack, So as you said, it's a very good point you made, Graham. The camera bag you carry has to be weight distribution. Like the weight distribution is very important, and these days it's pretty much in all the bags. But back in the day, backpacks were very different, and the weight distribution is really important. Same with the backpacks you take away when you go backpacking with clothes and stuff in there. Now you've got all these support mechanisms, and they really sit on your back really very comfortably. You can adjust the height for your spine and everything else. So that is definitely the first thing to consider when you're packing or when you're buying a bag to actually take away. So you've got to test the bag out. The next thing is to actually divide up your compartments so that your equipment sits in a way where the bouncing or the putting your bag down on the ground is not going to damage anything. There's not going to be movement in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's another thing. But when we went away, I remember getting this system for carrying your lenses, and it was a breastplate. So it was kind of like the video camera breastplates they've got these days.
Yeah.
But instead of the GoPro, you had this little channel, which at the base of your camera or your lens, I carried the 70 to 200 mil lens. On that little mount, you could put a base plate, which was the attachment that sat in the chest plate.
Okay.
So I could twist it and put it onto my chest, and I would carry my lens on my chest. And the reason for carrying it on my chest was very specific, because as we walked through Kendavu, that's the name of the island, as we walked through these jungles, I was really aware that my hip height would brush along trees and so there's a risk of damaging things. And so on my chest it was really safe. And I found, and I had to carry that for 10 days, but really, really handy, because I could flip it off, put it on. I had a little pouch for my small lens, and I just went back and forward, and it was great. And it was also good because for me to capture people walking, sometimes I had to be behind them, sometimes I had to be up the hill, sometimes I had to way in front of them,
down them,
and wide shot,
Yeah.
And context. It allowed you to do all that. It allowed you to run with the gear. It was great. It was really fun.
Yeah,
you felt like you're a serious photographer,
like a proper photographer, not just mucking about. That's actually another thing.
I don't know about you, but sometimes I get this guilty feeling. I think there's a word for it, isn't it? Like imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Oh yeah, absolutely. People want to find out you don't really know what you're doing. All that stuff. Knocking out great work, right. But it's I've heard that a lot. With I mean, even you're very good at something, it's funny, but you and people love your work, and you think but they don't really know. I mean, the work is the photograph. But,
that's right.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It creeps up on you, I guess, because if you practice something long enough, you have to get good at it. And if you actually like what you're doing, you're going to become really good at it.
Exactly.
And I think it's like a frog in boiling water, that old cliche, because you don't realize how good you're getting when you're the one getting better,
Yeah.
And other people can notice your work.
Well, I think that's a good point, because also, I mean, I look at what I'm doing, and I've had people really like stuff, but every time I look at something, I can see what's wrong with it. And in fact, Colin made a great tip once. He said that, and I've seen this elsewhere, he never looks at, I think it was Colin told me this, he never looks at photographs for 3 months. Because what happens when you do that, you're looking at the photographs with sort of fresh eyes, and you can't remember what you were trying to get at the time. You just look at the photograph as it is. I think that was anyway. Somebody told me that, and I thought it was really good, because if you look at a photograph straight after you've taken it, Colin said don't delete them. I think that was maybe what Colin said. But if you look at a photograph straight after you've taken it, you can see all the things that aren't what you were aiming for. Some things in the wrong spot, or the lighting is, or whatever. You're not looking at it objectively. You're looking at it or as a piece of art in its own right. You're looking at it against this expectation you had, which might not have been particularly realistic either, depending on what it is you're doing.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is sometimes, if we're talking about, I mean, Colin Seaton, he shoots a lot of photos using his phone.
Yeah.
And so it's a different practice, because when you're shooting on your phone, sometimes actually the phone allows you to shoot things with very little thought and planning. And so I think sometimes when you're doing that, there's an advantage not to delete the photo straight away, because you're taking them almost as a throwaway picture. But when you analyze it later, there might be something in it when you crop it. So that's a valid point. But just to cement what you've just said in relation to that, I think, and this is why your podcast is really good too, because part of learning or being in the creative industries is a combination of all of these things, feeling like an imposter, learning without knowing you're learning, all of these things. And so it's very important to hear other people's processes, because what happens as a photographer is you end up in a place that you practice what you practice by yourself. Many photographers continue to develop organically, learning a workshop here, learning a workshop there, getting a tip here, getting a tip there, figuring things out, experimenting, growing, evolving. So there's no gauge to see how you're doing. And so hearing other people's processes sometimes helps, because you go, all right, that's definitely not me, or, oh, I could use a little bit of that. And so it really helps place your own practice.
I think that's a very good point. And I the thing about the creative arts is that I think you're always learning. I don't think you ever get to a point where you've stopped learning. I think there's always something, and it might be looking at other people's work, and you get an inspiration that they tried something you'd never thought of. And another thing I like to do is to switch disciplines. So I mostly photograph animals, but I like portraits, urban. And sometimes when you switch disciplines, you're having to look at things in a different way. And then you realize you could actually go back to what you normally shoot, but apply something you've learned. And then it's like your style progresses. I don't think, you develop a style as an artist, I suppose, but to me, it's something that evolves as well. I look at stuff I shot 10, 15 years ago, and it's not what I would shoot now.
For all sorts of reasons. Literally yesterday, yesterday, Sunday. So for about 2 months, I knew there was a job coming up to photograph the interior of an apartment. All right. So essentially real estate photography. Now, I've done real estate photography before, and the industry has gone a particular way, and the pictures that you see in the industry are really unrealistic. It's ultra HDR, right? So you see the room, and then you see the sky like it's a proper exposure, and it looks dysfunctional.
I know what you mean.
But the trick is, as I was saying before, to understand what other people are doing, understand what you're doing, and then work out the compromise between what you're going to do to make it feel like it sits amongst the other shots, because you don't want to apply your style to it so that and jars with the other photos in the collection of other apartments, right? So
it's more of a documentary photograph rather than a piece of art, depending on what you define as art. But it's documentary in as much as you're documenting what it looks like and maybe putting it in context. I would even call it you're creating a look based on brief, which is a combination of technique, the correct equipment, and understanding what the client actually wants as output. Because finally, the final purpose is to sell the flat, right? It's to sell the apartment. But you want a quality photo. Anyway, the point I'm making is, because I knew I had to shoot this 2 months in advance, it gave me a lot of time to consider what equipment I'm going to need, what the weather was going to be like, what the light inside the apartment was going to be like at the specific time that we were going to shoot. And so I had time to prepare,
and I went and bought a geared head. Do you know the geared heads? They have the precision controls on them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the head that I use for most of my photography is a really solid ball head joint.
Yeah, that's what I tend to use when I use a tripod. Yeah.
Yeah, and ball heads are great. Loosen it, you can move your camera wherever you want, fasten it, you're done. But it's not an exact movement.
Yeah.
It's not a movement. Whereas when you're shooting architecture, or real estate photography falls into the architectural category because you're shooting interiors, etc.
Yeah.
When you're shooting architecture, your movements have to be so precise because generally you're layering a stack of documents on top of each other, a stack of images on top of each other, to get this HDR effect, right?
Yeah.
And so I went out and bought a geared head, and there are dozens on the market now because the equipment has opened up. There is there is an ability for professionals to buy equipment that isn't the cost of a small car, you know?
Yeah.
So I went and bought this equipment, and I bought a bigger. I normally work with a very lightweight Gitzo tripod, which is a travel tripod, because I can take it everywhere, and it's so light, and it's easy to release, and I like the way that it works, you know?
Yeah.
But and because I shoot a lot of portraiture and I shoot a lot of events when I'm shooting commercial work, and when I go and shoot my own projects, because I work with artists as well. I work with a lot of artists in Sydney, and I shoot. It's generally people photography. So my equipment isn't too specific.
Yeah.
And because I come from that advertising world, I know the kind of equipment that I need for the right kind of job. And if I need something specific, I know where to go and hire it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for this specific job, I went out and bought a very, very sturdy tripod and this geared head. Now, it might seem extraordinary, maybe overkill to buy it for this job, but the intention is to do more interior and architectural work.
Okay.
And also, working with a geared head changes the nature of how you work, you know? And if you change the physicality of how you work, your visual changes as well.
That's a good point. It's it's like your whole approach. You're working with an outcome in mind, a particular result in mind, but also how you get there and the methodology you use will, to some extent, depending on what it is, be dependent on the equipment you have. And if you're changing equipment, as you said, there's something that's fairly fundamental that does impact how you need to approach the shoot, how you need to approach getting the photographs, how you look at how you get to that end point. Change the critical piece of the process. And the same applies to lenses as well. You know, when you're shooting telephoto, you go wide angle, you go for a fixed focal length, you go for a prime lens, and that's going to change how you approach your shoot and your subject.
Totally. It for this particular job, I went out and I hired I shoot with a Canon. So I hired a Canon 11 to 24 mil lens. Now, if you don't know the 24 to 11 to 24 mil lens, it looks like a fisheye lens.
Yeah.
But it doesn't distort the image like a fisheye lens.
Right. Okay. Right? Yeah. It's one of those
really wide. Yeah. It shoots really wide, but it's a corrected lens.
Yeah.
Beautiful for architectural work.
Yeah. That is the cost of a small car, isn't it?
That's the cost of a small car. That's why you hired it.
Rent it.
You know, like when you hire equipment, you have to be grateful for these companies that hire equipment because they have so much of gear and they spend so much money to keep the gear. So you develop a relationship, and this is all part of being a photographer. You know, it's not just the photos you take. It's you build your understanding of the community, the industry, the professionalism. You got to build your network and your connections with peers so you can ask them questions. Like, although I had done real estate photography in the past, I haven't done real estate photography for a long time. So I actually rang a friend and had a sit down with them, and he ran me through some of the processes that are being used today, because he
Okay.
shoots architectural work.
Yeah.
And so just to get that insight
Yeah.
was very helpful, because
Yeah.
I had my own way that came through organic use and experience. But
Yeah.
I didn't know what the industry did. And
Yeah.
so to get insight like that was invaluable.
Yeah.
And it was in the it was just a phone call away, because
Yeah.
we're friends for a long time. So he had no problems sharing this information with me. Some
Yeah.
photographers may not, because of that competitiveness.
Yeah, that's a shame. I mean, you've raised a really good point. I'm sort of conscious of time as well, and I'm not quite sure how long we've been talking because I wasn't paying attention. um, and there's a little list of things. I think we've probably got to the second, third anyway. But yeah, the point about that is community, and also about there's sort of two things there. That a lot of photographers do work alone, and anybody listening to this, if you're you know, you love photography, but you're doing it on your own, I think there's a really good argument to become part of a community somehow. That might be a community you can get involved with physically, like We're Observers in Sydney. You know, you connect with people when you do photo walks and things, or workshops, or it might be you join a group online where you can just make connections with people. And then if you do need to find somewhere to maybe hire a specific bit of equipment or something like that, and you just don't know, you can always put it out there to the group, because generally someone will know what's going on, or will know somebody who knows someone, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. The community aspect is really, really a valid point, I think.
And sharing work and getting ideas from one another. It doesn't have to be these critiques. I'm a little more wary of these groups where they like to critique your photographs every month and all of that, because to me, it's subjective. And even when I went, there was the Australian Institute of Professional Photographers, which I was a member of for a while. I think it's stopped now. But when I put some work in to get the accreditation, I got feedback. And one of the guys criticised the photograph I'd taken of a whale because it was sort of a bit out of focus in the back. Well, actually, or there was something he said, it was actually the whale's blow is what you could see. So there's this cloud of sort of steam above the whale where it just breathed out. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's fine. But you clearly don't understand what it is I've taken a photograph of. And I think art's subjective. So, and yes, there's technically correct photographs. And also you can take amazing photographs that are technically incorrect. You know, something's out of focus or something's wrong. But just the way that photograph happens to work, what you captured in that moment is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, you can trash it. Technically, it's all over the place, but it doesn't matter. You know, it's a really good piece of work of art, because, and to me, good work of art is something that connects with the viewer. The viewer gets something. It might be an emotional reaction from it. Hopefully not, you know, horror or distaste or whatever, but there's a real connection with it. So yeah, connection is one way. Getting involved in community is one way of doing that. And I think that shouldn't be underrated, really, particularly if you do spend a lot of your time with your photography just being on your own. I think that's very valuable.
Sure. I think this is really, really important. And, you know, to that point, you know, once you've got that community, all of these other aspects of preparing for a job, thinking about your gear, getting insight into how to work certain processes. Astrophotography is a classic example.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when we were running workshops for astrophotography and light painting at one point. I think you were for the light painting. And
I went to light painting. I did astro, but not at the same time you. So I loved my gear up that cliff through the big spider webs.
That's right. And you know, like astrophotography is a classic preparation type project, because you've got to think about your camera gear. Yeah. But on top of your camera gear, so again, this becomes in the categories, right? So you think about your basic equipment, which is your tripod, your camera, your batteries, your backup batteries, your backup batteries. And so you get all your camera gear sorted out, the bag you're going to get in. Because when you go astrophotography, if your listeners are familiar with astrophotography, you're working in the dark. Yeah. And if other people are with you, they might be exposing. So you can't really use light to see what you're doing, because you'll be thrown out of the group,
thrown off the cliff,
thrown out into the night. So you got to have a bag packed in a way that you can find your way around it in the dark, very, very low light. And on top of that, you've got your photography gear. Then you got to think about the gear that you're going to wear. Like if you're out at night and you're getting Milky Way, depending on where you are in the world, you're either out in the middle of winter. In Australia, it's very cold when the best time for astrophotography. And you've got to think about what you're wearing. You've got to think about the gloves. You've got to think about gloves with cut off fingers. You've got to think about beanies. Like there's a bunch of clothes you've got to think about. Then you've got to think about your car, where you're going to park it. Is it going to...
Well, I'm going to think about a nice comfy chair. I did it. And I was standing, I don't know, for about 8 hours, because it was maybe not quite that long, because I think I got up there somewhere around midnight. And I finished at 6 o'clock in the morning, because it was starting to get light. Yeah. You know, my legs were hurting, and we were up the top of the cliff.
That's right.
The other bit, if you really get into astro, though, you've then got that motor-driven thing that compensates for the movement of the Earth. Because if you are if you're shooting stars, you start to get movement after about 20 seconds. It's really much, much sooner than you might expect. They start to there's enough movement that they're not spot points anymore. And so you can get these motorized things that you stick on the tripod. I've got one. It's bloody heavy. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but very heavy. We'll bleep that. But yeah, you know, it's another bit of gear that you've got to know how to set up, probably in the dark, unless you're able to shade the light enough or do it away from other people, so you're not adding light to their shoot. And then because that all has to be calibrated as well for where you are on the planet. So well, if it's a specialized thing.
One of the things I learned from working with Ian in the studio was to rehearse what you're going to do. So before a shoot, we would set up the gear, we would test the lights, we would do some preliminary insightful tests and work out almost like a trial run, almost like a what they do these days with weddings. You know, they have like a pre-wedding and then they have a wedding.
Too much.
useless in my opinion. But anyway, this is also a valid point, because if you're doing something like astrophotography and you're working in the dark, you want to make sure that you set your gear up, run through it while you can see, and figure out the number of things you can do. And it doesn't take long to get acclimatized to what you have to do. But if you're new to it, and as a way of understanding other people's processes, a dry run is a good idea too.
But so I've got two hot tips actually, because there was one that I thought about earlier and I haven't said it. But so two top tips. Simple one.
Hot tips, great.
Hot tips, not top tips. Anyway, we won't go into that. So one of them is I always put the lens hood on the lens. It doesn't matter what's going on. But the reason I do that is I've done a lot of photography on boats. So when I was photographing whales, and the boats I was on had quite a lot of metal to them. And of course, you're on something that's moving. And I tend to, if I've got my camera on a strap on me, I'll put my head and one arm through the straps. It's sort of off to one side. So it tends to hang down kind of on the outside of my leg rather than be flopping around in front of me. But with the best will in the world, there's a good chance you're going to bash against the metal. It might be a stairway thing or a bit of metal somewhere. But normally if the camera's swinging, it will be the lens hood that hits whatever it's hitting and not the lens itself. So if you've got the lens hood on, they're plastic, they've got some give in them, and generally they can take, if you bash against something and it's just the lens hood, you're not going to damage your lens. Because getting back to buying a small car, my lenses aren't quite that bad, but they're not cheap either. Anyway, so that was one tip. And the other one, talking about preparation, tip. There are things where you can go and set up and rehearse and all of that. But if you're doing wildlife, and particularly if you're traveling to see wildlife, you can't really do that. So the tip I always give to people, so that you get really good at knowing what settings you need to use on the camera and that you can get onto a subject fast, keep it in focus, which is another thing, is just photograph birds. Because birds are everywhere and they're actually pretty tricky. because often they won't hang around in branches very long. If they're flying, that's great practice for getting the bird nice and sharp. But if there's a building behind, something like that, getting that out of focus, if that's what you're going for. So it's really good practice. And if you do that a lot, when it comes to photographing something in the wild, you already know what your settings need to be. You're not even really thinking about it that much, just compensating maybe for exposure, or, you'll understand how your autofocus works. I use back button focus because I just find that easier to use with that sort of situation. But that's my other tip. If you're going to shoot something where you can't rehearse, look for something near you that is similar. If it's motor racing and you want to practice that, well, most of us live where there are roads and cars. So just try photographing cars and going for the kind of end result you're looking for. I was going to talk about starting with the end in mind, but I don't think I will, because that's another conversation. And I think you need to wind things up. But just on what we've spoken about, is there anything you'd like to say as kind of a parting thought?
There was something I wanted to say as a parting thought, but I'd forgotten now.
It's parted. Departed. Your parting thought has departed.
Yeah, that's right. No, look, there is one thing I did want to say, and I think this is a really important characteristic for all photographers, all creative people. There's a lot to be said for being resourceful. So if you're out in the field and you've gone through your processes and you've packed your bag, and then you get out in the field and you realize you've left your batteries on the charger in the power point on your kitchen bench, right? Yeah. So you've got to be resourceful. And one of the reasons I decided to shoot with a camera manufacturer like Canon is because at the time I bought that camera, Canon cameras were dominant. Nikon and Canon were dominant, which meant I could go anywhere in the world and be fairly certain I could access things that would fit the camera that I've got, whether that be filters, whether that be spare batteries, anything, right? And I'll give you an example. I was at an event, shooting an event. It was a music event, and the concert hadn't finished, and I was down to the last half an hour, and my battery died, and I had no other battery. But during the event, I saw a participant shooting on the same camera that I was shooting, and he obviously didn't look like a professional photographer because his camera looked brand new.
All the corners of the paint rubbed off all the edges.
And so I just took this in at the start of the show, and I went, "Oh, that guy's shooting with the same camera." I just took it in for whatever reason, took it in, and then when I ran out of battery, looked around, found him, went up to him, and I said, "Hey, listen, this is the situation. I could really use your help." And he took his battery out, gave it to me, and that was how I finished the show. And I got to the end of the show, gave it back. Massive thank you. He was really glad because he felt like he did something purposeful, like he did something of value. Yeah. And I felt really glad because, I just had to use it once, right? This theory that if I needed something, I could find it. And so being resourceful is part of the tricks in your bag. Yeah. Another quick example, I was at a festival shooting. It was a food festival, Cheese Lovers Festival, and I didn't have a reflector with me.
Right.
Right? So I had to photograph some food, and I needed to the direct light was too strong. I had to bounce light, but I didn't have a reflector. So I got my assistant to grab one of the empty plates, and I used the plate above my flash, pointed the flash into the plate, and it bounced the light back down. But it was a really nice quality of light because it was white porcelain, right? So or ceramic, but it gave a really nice soft light. It was curved and everything. So in that instance, forgetting the reflector, it almost helped my final shot.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. That thing about forgetting battery.
That's my hot tip. Hot tip.
Excellent.
Learn how to become resourceful.
And look out for people with the same gear you've got.
Yeah.
In fact, on my very last photo walk, I'm pretty sure I'd either forgotten my battery or I'd forgotten to charge it, and it was completely flat. And I think I borrowed one of yours. I'm not sure, but I do recall also on another photo walk, I'm pretty sure the reverse happened. You didn't have a battery. I've got the extender on my Canon body, so I've got 2 batteries in there. I'm pretty sure I helped you out. So look out for people with the same gear, because you might need to borrow something.
Maybe that's the little footnote. Being resourceful makes you forgetful, or makes you careless.
But if you're forgetful and careless, at least be resourceful. You've got the fighting chance. All right.
Right.
We'll wind it up there. Thanks, Shane, for taking part in this. It's been fun.
No worries. Glad to be
here. So for those of you listening, Shane and I have been talking about possibly doing this as something that we do more regularly, as just the two of us chatting about some aspect of photography. As you can see, we started out with a list of things and didn't get very far at all. But anyway, it does mean there's plenty to talk about. So if you've enjoyed this, if you think it's a good idea, please let me know. So my email address is graham@ge.photography. And if you're in Sydney, do look up what Shane's doing with We're Observers. So there are photo walks, workshops, and it's community. So it's something to belong to. And if you're not in Sydney, but in fact would like to do courses, so I've got stuff online, and I'm also building an online community. So one way or another, one or both of us perhaps can help you with your photography. So on that note, I'm going to wind it up. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you on the next podcast. Bye for now. Bye,
See you later, Graham. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it. Okay. Bye now. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Now, I just want to say thank you for tuning in and joining me in the Wildlife and Adventure Photography podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please give me a like, a subscribe, maybe tell your friends, and by all means leave a comment. And if there is a subject you would like me to cover in the future, please let me know, and I'll be very happy to do my best. So thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next podcast. Bye for now.